Alexander Hamilton. My name is Alexander Hamilton.
There have been a lot of movies, obviously, that are moving back and delaying because of the pandemic. This is one of the rare projects to move up over a year from originally from fall of 2021. What makes now the right time to drop this story about America back then?
Well, I don't know that there's ever a right time. I do know that in a time when there is no live theater, and that includes Hamilton, but is regional theater and off-Broadway theater. And the fact that we had this beautiful love letter to theater in movie form that Tommy has spent 3 years editing felt like a gift. And it felt like a gift we could give you sooner and in this moment rather than later. So I'm just grateful we had the foresight to film it and that Disney met us where we were in terms of pushing up the release date so that we could have it now. And then in terms of the moment we're in a moment where we're talking about systemic injustice that has been there since the founding of our country. And so the lyrics that deal with that resonate more now than I think they may have in 2015. The words of the show have not changed, but the world sure has.
Hamilton is a pretty intelligent, pretty complicated show that's examining political issues in a nuanced way and telling a story incredibly virtuosically through great performers, and is unafraid to center Black people in the discussion of the history of this country. And I think all of those things allowed this piece of art to be moved forward. Whereas a lot of pieces of art, now that people have become aware of a tide of our moment that is tending towards insisting on accountability, we see a lot of pieces of art being moved back. And maybe that says something about the piece of art you were making in the first place.
We're asking a lot of questions right now. We're wondering how we inherited the problems that we have. We're trying to remember what it felt like to go anywhere and be, connected intimately with anybody that is not the same 2 or 3 people. There are times when art saves the day, and this could potentially be one of them. At the very least, it's something to do, but I believe it's bigger than that. I believe it will give voice to a revolution, and I believe it'll bring families even closer together.
In the core of our story, it's a group of people who are fighting through a messy time to figure out how they can get what they need. That's exactly what we're all going through. We're all in a very messy time, and our hearts and our souls need to move forward, both through the COVID virus and the social injustice issues. And so I think it's great therapeutically for us to come together to say, there is messiness now, there are unanswered questions now, and there is confusion about the future now. But if we bond together, even from separate living rooms, we can find a common way forward. And so I think in that way, it can bring a real sense of community to everybody.
We could possibly be in a very serious turning point in terms of the narrative of this country, in terms of people demanding for change and justice. After watching George Floyd murdered for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it made it very real for many people, the systematic racism that is inherent in this nation. And I think the reason why the show is very important right now is because the founding fathers, you see, in order to create this country, they looked at the regime that was governing them and said, hey, we need change. This isn't right, and we don't like this. And it directly correlates to what protesters are doing right now. There's a regime that they see and they say, look, it needs to change. And they're taking the streets and shouting it so everyone can hear that this is the country they wish to see.
If the show can provide any energy to this moment and this movement, then we're grateful for that as well. One of the themes of the show is you can't control your legacy. And you can just do what you do, and the world will do with it what it will. And we continue to be surprised by the resonances of the show in the moment as the moment changes.
How do you guys look back at, that bold decision on behalf of Lin and company when it came to the show's multicultural casting? I mean, did you think this was, in a way, maybe a response to the history of showbiz, to the whitewashing, to the racial stereotypes and caricatures that have plagued the business for so long?
Lin wrote the show with a very clear idea in mind. He was going to tell this story of someone who came from the Caribbean to another place. And so it's a story that he understood in his bones because of his own family's experience. And we knew if we were going to be using the language of hip hop and rap and R&B and blues, as well as, songs that you might hear more traditionally in a Broadway theater, that this had to be a show populated by the women and men who make and made that art form possible. So this was not colorblind casting in any way. This was intentional. This was also about trying to make the America of then look like the America now and open a conversation, and not about lionizing, but about questioning these founders and what they did and looking at their achievements and at their failings. And so if that's relevant now, 5 years after Lin put his pen down, then perhaps we can be part of a conversation that is going on and needs to continue from here on out.
It was very powerful for us to be a part of it, but also to see an American history story told through the voices and bodies of Black and Brown actors. We're living in a time where we have access to so much information. We can't stand for ignorance and intolerance anymore. There's just too much information. There's too much access. You're either choosing to be okay with the injustices that are happening in today's world, or you're ignorant to it, which means that you need to educate yourself. And that's on you. That's not somebody else's responsibility to educate you and teach you about different cultures and different races. That's your responsibility. And for me personally, I've just taken this as a moment to really learn and listen and educate myself, and then to advocate and reach out and use my voice.
None of the things that we are saying now haven't been echoed for the last 200 years. You know what I mean? So the idea that the stage is, we're telling the story of these men that have always been these big marble statues. The whole purpose of the show was to bring those men off the pedestals and see them as an expression of their human selves. And so hopefully that begins the conversation about these particular folks. But in modern day, even from an entertainment biz lens, what really is unusual about seeing us on stage? I've been on stage for 21 years on Broadway. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, the world has already been evolving. What we're saying is why is it happening now, and why is it happening at the speed that it's happening now? It's all valid conversation. It's all part of an awakening. It's all part of this idea of enlightenment. How do we get further? How do we get higher? How do we include everyone? And I think Hamilton does that intrinsically, just by putting us on the stage.
We're really realizing that white supremacy is upheld by systems. The police departments around the country just happen to be the most violent arm of white supremacy, but we have to look at the criminal justice system. We need to look at education. We need to look at economics and how Black people are paid to do the work that they do. And so casting is one thing, but I think we're having deeper conversations than that all over the country, and that's long overdue.
I think it's also not just about casting, but it's also about hiring more diverse people behind the scenes to tell our stories, to direct, to write, to produce. It's so much more than just the actors. And yes, a big part of it is representation and what people are seeing, but it's also the people that are executing our stories and telling them right.